Alright everybody, it's time for another Round the World update. It is Sunday morning, and pretty much nothing's going on with my 29 miscellaneous here. I just got it still sitting in there. You can tell if you watched my last Round the World update, those plants are still stuck to the filter intake. So it just goes to show you I have not done anything in here. I didn't even top off the water that I said I was going to. So this tank is just sitting here ticking over like it always does. Nothing to really talk about or report on, so I'm going to move right along because I do have a few other things I want to talk about today. My gourami tank here. I have not done anything to it other than water change and some plant removal. You can see I really thinned out the water sprite in the upper left. It had a lot of the standard water sprite. That what you see there is predominantly the lace leaf, and it allows a lot more light to penetrate the tank. What had happened was some of the regular that does not have, I guess you could call it the broadleaf water sprite, was growing in there and it was propagating. There was little babies all over the place, and the little babies are what was blocking so much of the light, and that's why this tank had become so dark. So I got in there and I thinned a lot of that out, did a water change of course, and then that was about it really. I haven't done anything else. Little notes of interest. I have seen both my rubber lip plecos in here this morning at the same time, so I know both of them are still alive. Speak of the devil, there's one right there in front of us. I have also seen my, well, we just got a little tiny glimpse of him down there, my little bumblebee catfish that lives underneath this rock in this corner. And then my Farlowella catfish. It's kind of hard to see. You have to look in the reflection on the end of the tank, but you can see hanging off of the filter intake there. That's pretty much where that Farlowella likes to hang out now, and is always back there on the filter intake. And then of course you can see these little guys up here are some of my Otocinclus, so they're still in there doing their job. There's 4 or 5 of them right in this little cluster of leaves right here. So this tank's going nice and smooth. Everything's running over the way I like to. The one thing I will note is I'm now down to 4 neons. That's from 18, well, maybe 2 months ago, I want to say. It hasn't been, that long that it's taken for them to get eaten, and I'm pretty sure at this point the culprit is that little bumblebee jellycat. I'm sorry, the little bumblebee cat. I used to have a bumblebee jellycat in here, and I believe it ate an Otocinclus one day and died from eating it. But I do have a South American bumblebee catfish that hides down underneath that rock that gourami's looking at. So I'm considering getting him out of here. I know it would be a real nightmare, or, well, maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to see. That's something that just crossed my mind a few minutes ago, that I really like neons in this tank. I really like the way they add a splash of color, and when you've got a nice large school of them, it looks all the better. So that would be cool. But obviously I'm not going to be able to do that as long as I keep that bumblebee catfish in there. And considering we never ever see that bumblebee catfish, I would far rather see the neon. So I could put that bumblebee in one of my 10-gallon tanks upstairs that don't really have any bottom dwellers in them to begin with. And then that would sort of serve 2 purposes. It would get it out of this tank, and it would give me some bottom cleaning fish in my tank upstairs. So we'll see. That might be on the agenda in the future, but for now, we're just going to let that one sit. My angelfish tank, I have gotten in there and I removed all of that temple plant that was sort of dying and had the algae and the green slime growing on it, the cyanobacteria. I pulled all that out. I vacked more gravel out. I didn't shoot any video of it. It was just sort of spur of the moment. I felt like doing it, and I really was not in the mood to shoot video. So rather than put it off like I normally would, I said, to heck with it, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and people are going to have to just get told about it rather than see me do it. So be told, I got in there and I removed more gravel. You can see how bright white it is in certain areas. I took a lot of the top layers off. I'm really not sure how I'm going to do this when I get all the way down as I remove more and more. If you've ever had one kind of gravel or substrate in a tank and you've removed most of it and then replaced it with something else, you will forever find little pieces of that substrate turning up. And since the substrate I plan on putting in here is the substrate I like, that Eco Complete, that really dark substrate that I have in all my other tanks, this stuff here, that white sandy stuff, if I leave a speck of that in there, it's going to turn up and it's going to stick out like a strawberry in a stew. So I'm really going to have to get all of that sand and gravel out of there before I start putting anything else back in. How I'm going to do that exactly, I don't know. It may end up that I have to get in there and physically remove all of those rocks and start over. I really don't want to do that. I really would like to just get as much out as I can by vacuuming it out, and then simply replace it with some black substrate a little, gently, and just kind of put it in there around the existing rocks. But we'll have to see how that actually works out. I really don't think that it's going to be as easy as that. It probably is going to involve a lot of work, and that is precisely the reason that I've been dragging my feet on this one for so long. It's just something that's going to kind of happen at some point, probably once again, as I've said before, over the winter when I don't have a lot to do and I can't get outside and enjoy the outdoors. I will be in here doing projects and working on fish tanks. Oh, my black ghost knife fish. I got nothing really going on in here. I did do a water change this week. I wiped the glass down, shot a little bit of video, sort of talked about this tank. It's one of those tanks that I really put a lot of thought and time into putting together, and it's one that I haven't really sat down and just talked about for a little while. So I did shoot some video of this tank this week. You can check out my black ghost knife tank playlist and see all of the latest videos I've got on this one. As with all my tanks, they all have their own playlists. Didn't do a ton. I did get in there and remove some of the water sprite, some of the floating water sprite, and it opened up the top a little more. I guess I did move my power head in the back to give me a little more free-flowing circulation, and I got onto my Java fern up here and I removed a lot of the green slime cyanobacteria that was growing on it. You can still see it's all over it. As I've said before, it'll always be in there. I'm not trying to eradicate it. It's just part of being in the tank, and it's just part of the maintenance process. So I sprayed it down with hydrogen peroxide a little bit, which puts a dent on it, but doesn't, you'd have to take some serious time and effort to really kill it off using hydrogen peroxide. But I do keep it in check, and that was part of what I did in this last water change, so it was a pretty good one. My 20 long open top, and you can see I just have that piece of cardboard there to block the light so I don't get a lot of bleed over, and it puts glare in my other tanks when I'm shooting videos. So that's the only reason that's there. It's not serving any other purpose. Nothing really going on in this one. Again, simple water change this week. I got in there and did a little work on the cyanobacteria. I did pull this piece of wood out and scrubbed the wood down fairly well so that it's nice and clean now, and you can actually see some wood color and grain and texture and everything on it. It won't be long before it's covered with the green slime cyanobacteria again, as everything in this tank always does and always has. So the neons that are in here are probably going to go in my gourami tank. The glow light tetras that are in here can go pretty much anywhere. I'm thinking about putting some of them right back in my black ghost knife fish tank and bolstering the school I've got in there. And then, of course, the two angelfish still need to find a home. As I break this end of the room down, I'm going to try to do something different, but I'll get into that in just a moment. The room's a mess right now, so I got to kind of step over stuff to get around here to get to my brackish tank. This will be the next one on the list that we look at. There we go. We can actually see into it now. As usual, I've been working on the red slime cyanobacteria. That's more of just like a hobby for me at this point, is just keeping that stuff beaten back. I'm never going to get rid of it. I did 2 heavy treatments of the red slime stain remover. I did those back to back without any pause at all. So I did, 96 hours of straight treatment on it, and it beat it back considerably. But as you can already see, if you've been following along and have looked at my all the treatment I did, you can see where it's back in sheets and it's already growing. Look, it's so thick it's actually coming off and starting to peel up in sheets right there. So this stuff is a nightmare as far as maintenance. It's not hurting the fish. I have heard some people say that cyanobacteria can be harmful to your fish. If that's the case, I'd have a lot of dead fish a long time ago. And I've heard it said that cyanobacteria is harmful to humans as well. That may or may not be true. There are thousands and thousands of different species of cyanobacteria. What species we're looking at right now, I have no idea. There are some that are toxic to humans and you really shouldn't come in contact with and cause you problems and whatever. I don't believe this is that. I've been around this stuff forever. I always wash my hands when I'm done with it, primarily because it stinks to high heaven. It smells like an old wet dog in a musty basement lying on a pile of old newspapers. It stinks. So whenever I get it on my hands or anything, I wash them pretty thoroughly, and I usually don't immediately use any kind of like a siphon or anything. I don't take it out of this tank and then put it into any other one. It's always, you know, thoroughly dried out in several days before I ever use it again. So don't really have a problem with that stuff in any other tank except my Brackish one. Again, if you follow along, you know all this, but that's all I really got going on in this tank this week, is just watching that cyanobacteria grow back in. My quarantine tank down here still has that Corydoras in it. It was the one that lost all his barbels. Still not exactly sure why he lost his barbels, but he did. He's still in there and doing fine. It's just a matter of when I get around to moving him out of there. I think he's safe to go into a different tank at this point. This tank does have the green slime cyanobacteria in it as well, so I'm going to have to be careful when I collect him out of there. I'm going to try to separate him out with the net and then put him in some fresh water, and then maybe dip him out of the fresh water back into a new tank or something to try to reduce the amount of cyanobacteria I transfer along with him. So we'll see how that goes as well, but that'll be happening fairly soon. Excuse me. Snail tank is still just a snail tank, nothing really to talk about there. My T-bar / gudgeon tank, I have been working on trying to get that plant in the back to actually plant and root in, and I wound up breaking it, and I've shot a couple videos of trying to get it planted back in. And if you look, you can see one of the pieces that I had planted in is now uprooted and has floated up to the top and is still not rooted into the ground in this tank. So that piece is probably going to come out fairly soon. This piece back here, the one dead center in the far back of the tank, I believe is still rooted in enough under that rock that I'm going to get a chance for it to actually root in and establish. And you can see, I mean, he's dug, I know you don't get the 3D effect with the camera or whatever, but that is a mountain of sand back there that he has dug up. So once again, I'm going to have to get in and take all that sand and move it back around behind this rock in the back. He clears it down to the glass in this corner for himself. He always digs himself a hole back there. So my main concern is just trying to keep these big piles away from the filter intake. And right now you can see the filter intake, if you can see through all the fish, is covered with roots and debris from all of the plants that are getting torn up. So this T-bar is quite an ornery little fish. He's my problem fish in this tank, but he's not a problem in any sense that bothers me too much. It's just, you know, he keeps messing with my plants. I don't know what it is with him messing with my plants, but he doesn't like them or something. I don't know. He seems to dig them up out of spite. He doesn't eat them. He's not trying to burrow or anything there. It's like he doesn't like that plant in the back, and he just keeps trying to dig it up and tear it up for me. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not too worried about it. You know, like I said, it's just a plant. I can always replant it. It gives me something to do. My 125 is still just ticking along. I don't think I've done anything. Let me try to get over here so we can see it all in one shot. Don't know if the last Round the World update included the update since I got in there and thinned out the water sprite that's in the top, the big massive plant you see with that root ball in the middle. That is technically floating. It is wedged between, if you see where my Synodontis is, he's right in front of that piece of wood. That piece of wood goes all the way up to where that rock on the right is going up at an angle, and the wood is actually leaning on top of the rock underneath of all that root mass. And I've got some of those roots tucked in between the rock and the root. I just sort of lifted the wood up a little bit, tucked some roots in, and then laid the wood back down. All that does is secure it in place. It just anchors it there. When you think of a plant that would be not rooted into the ground, like the Anubias or something, that would be growing onto the rock. In fact, we can look at one right here. You see how this is actually growing on the rock itself? That is not what I would call a floating plant, even though it's not in the substrate proper. That is actually rooted to and attached onto this rock. It's not going to go anywhere. You'd actually have to rip those roots off in order to do that. My water sprite here is that's not the case, and that's the point I'm trying to get to, is it's still floating in the sense that those roots are not growing onto the rock or the wood. It's simply being held in there by being, I'm just pinching a few of those heavier root strands, and that simply anchors it in place. So for technical definitions, that is a floating plant, but I do have it anchored in place. And I'm going into that because I've had a few people ask me questions recently about whether or not that was rooted or if it was free floating. So there's your explanation for all that. Did get in, as I said, and I really thinned out a lot of the branching in the middle and opened it up so a lot more light could get through. I probably still need to get in and open it up again. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, and at some point I might need to get in there and actually even thin these roots out. They're just getting too big and bulky to allow light to get down to the front of the tank, so that's something that might be on the menu here in the future. So we'll see how that goes. My new brackish tank is still unoccupied. It still is waiting to be up to full salinity. I probably will add a little more salt today and bring it up a little more. It's been about a week since I've done that. The only concern I have in this tank is if you see those little dots on the back glass. I cannot decide whether they are dots of the brown diatom algae, but they look a little bit reddish to me, and I'm afraid I might already have that red slime cyanobacteria in here. So before I do anything, I'm watching very closely to find out what happens with that and whether or not that grows and spreads and becomes that cyanobacteria, or if it's just simply the diatom algae that's part of being a new tank. So we will keep our eye on that. My crayfish tank here is not really anything going on. The crayfish don't really even come out anymore. I think they're just getting ready to go into hibernation, even though it's not cold out. And I think my battery is about to die, so we're going to wrap this up and call this the end of the video. So thank you for watching it. We have made it around the world. There's the tank we started with. And again, we'll do a goodbye final video on these crayfish when I release them back into the wild, and that'll be within the next week or so. So make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up.